within proximity of the camp as I set up the tent and make dinner, etc. But I noticed this time was a bit different. He kept staring up at this steep, tree-filled mountainside, tail straight up, and barking. Not the kind of bark like when he sees a squirrel. He was definitely concerned about something. Now, the day before, I had found a note left under a rock at the last landmark, saying that there was a problem bear in the area that was harassing a group of campers a few days ago. And I myself had come across big cat tracks the day before, so I was definitely concerned that there may be more than just squirrels out there. I decided to climb some of the boulders at the foot of the hill while scouting the hillside for movement before I went to go hang my bear bag up there. Although there were trees on the hillside, the only ones that were suitable to hang my bag on were up the hill. If you don't know, a bear bag is a waterproof casing, which is used to protect food and other items from bears during camping trips. You have to hang them in trees so they can't reach them. I didn't see or hear anything, but my dog kept quietly whining like there was something up there. So while I was still concerned, I began hiking up this steep hill. It was so steep, I had to use the trees to balance and lean against so that I wouldn't go tumbling down before making it another 5 or 6 steps to the next tree. Anyway, I'm slowly making my way up this hill, hopping from tree to tree, trying to keep my balance. Then I get about 100 feet of elevation when I hear movement about 50 feet in front of me. My dog immediately goes from a deep, low growl to an aggressive bark. My heart starts pounding out of my chest, and I begin to panic. A million thoughts go racing through my head in a matter of seconds. If this was the aforementioned bear, my dog was going to try to save me, which would likely result in his death. And if I have to get off that hillside quickly, I would almost 100% trip and fall onto the boulders below. So I was feeling pretty screwed at that moment. Then I heard my smaller dog start barking and freaking out down by the campsite, which was just out of view. I had her zipped up in my tent so she wouldn't wander off while I was away. A few seconds later, I kind of snap out of it, and I take another few seconds to start putting my survival priorities in order and call my dog back to me. His name is Loki, by the way. He comes and sits against my feet as my back is against a tree, so I'm kind of stuck there at the moment. But my dog was seemingly trying to separate me from something up there, so I let him lean against me while I tried to collect myself. That's when I realized I had completely forgotten to turn my headlamp on, so I reach up so fast to turn it on, I basically end up punching myself in the face. I was having a serious adrenaline spike, so much so that my knees were beginning to shake. Once I get my lamp on, I'm getting myself ready to see a pair of eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing.
In a state of confusion, let me see.
I had just heard something there. We both did. And whatever it was, didn't get away
Kingdom
or
City,
sound
Missouri.
like it had
Close
made it
to my
too far.
destination.
I had to know what was up there. My thought process was, it's better to face it now than wait like a sitting duck all night. As I was looking up this hill, at one point, Loki lunges forward, unpinning me. He does one of those fake bluff charges at something that was about 15 feet up the hill. He was snarling and foaming at the mouth. As he does this, I finally see movement. Something was moving uphill. My dog made whatever it was blow its cover, so I'm zeroed in now.
According to my GPS,
I
about
call my dog
142
back
miles from my
and
destination.
silently watch
And the wind is
what I
kicking
saw.
up. But I'm doing my best
Made my
to
stomach
just
drop.
get there.
There was a man crouched about 75 feet directly above me, wearing not camouflage, but some raggedy clothing with a hood. He blended into the environment almost perfectly. It was almost like a makeshift ghillie suit, but with the face exposed. I couldn't see his eyes, and his face was covered in dirt or something. But I knew that we were staring right at each other.
Says it'll take me 2
Our
hours,
eyes
20
locked
minutes to
for
get
what
there.
seemed like several minutes.
Slight
There were
problem.
no words exchanged.
Not big enough for me to
But I
park
felt like I was
on the
trying to
property for the night.
subconsciously convey that I was going to
So I'm gonna have
stand
to get
my
to a
ground.
truck stop somewhere
I
nearby
wanted him to know
and
that
park
I
it for
saw
the night
him.
and get there in the morning.
But I guess I
and
was just too
off-road.
frightened to even speak. As I was staring at him, my small dog back at the
So, I'm
campsite
gonna start
began
looking for
barking her
parking.
head off again. It
Since
sounded like she
close.
was scared. So I had to get off that hill before total darkness set in,
Let's see.
or I could be seriously injured or risk dying trying to get back down.
No, not that
So
one.
carefully,
Can't
I
park
began
there.
making my way back down the
Not
hill
exactly
with
truck
Loki,
parking. No,
who
no,
doesn't
no.
want to leave,
Let's see
but he
this one.
listens. Periodically, I would stop with my
It's a
back
truck
against
stop.
a tree holding me up
Only
and look
60
in that
miles
direction
away.
again, just to make sure that it was clear I saw
Let's see.
whoever it was, and they knew that.
Out.
We eventually made it back down to the boulders. By the time I jumped down onto them, my other dog had stopped barking. I could only see the top of my tent from where I was. I thought she was just barking just a bark. Dachshunds tend to do that sometimes. But when I got there, I noticed that my dog had gotten out of the tent and was walking around the campsite, growling, with her tail sticking straight up. Still trying to hold it together, I thought, okay,
Yeah, there's only a
maybe
couple
she
locations
just got her
I can
nose
get
between
to.
the zippers and worked her way out of it. But I was certain that I had zipped it all the way closed to where she couldn't do that. Had someone come and let her out? So now, in a mixture of being terrified and pissed off, and the sudden urge of needing to do something, I reached into my day bag and pulled out my .40 and fired a single shot into the air. I then climbed into my tent with my gun next to me
Wow, somebody's
and waited
impatient.
until first light. As soon as the sun came up, I was packing my shit up and heading back down the mountain. It was all downhill, but I still couldn't cover the ground to get back to my car in one day. It was dark by the time I made it back to the previous campsite, about 4 miles away from my vehicle. Thankfully, there were other people there. We sat around the campfire they made, and I felt pretty safe and relieved. They told me they planned on heading to where I was the night before, so I told them what happened in detail. Needless to say, everyone was walking back to their cars in the morning. The thing that still creeps me out the most to this day is when I got home and started reading reviews of the same hike I was on. Other people have had similar experiences there. There was a man found dead from a fall around the same boulder range 2 years ago. And a year after that, a woman was found murdered. This happened to my husband and I about 3 years ago, in late November. It still gives us the chills to this day. While living in Seattle, my husband and I would frequently go surfing. Usually we would
Jeez. Hello? Definitely had my butthole puckered up a couple of times. The wind's really kicking up. Not enough time on the clock. I can get close, but not enough time on the clock. I can get it there tomorrow morning, no problem. I mean, basically, by the time I get there, I would have done maybe just a little over 600 miles, but like I said, not enough time on the clock. you also got to realize I got to slow down for the winds when it really picks up. I mean, holy crap, dude! I've had to slow down to 55 a few times. Yeah. The way. Did they say that they have overnight parking? Yeah, I guess I could try and do some sketchy shit, doo-dah. I know. My best shot. I mean, hell, I've been driving since what, 5 in the damn morning. I know, but just the way it looks, when I looked at the calendar, I'm sitting there thinking, oh fuck, these guys might have failed because it's the 29th now and I have to be home on the 31st. And the way it's looking, it's not looking good. Yeah. But like I said, I'm definitely pushing for it. Okay. So call them and ask them if they have overnight parking. Because if they do, I'll get there and offload it and park for the night. If they do. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, but like I said, basically after the wedding, I'm probably gonna have to be shut down for a couple more days because, like I said, dentist, teeth yanked. Like I said, my teeth are freaking killing me, and I'm doing everything I can to lessen the pain. All right, thank you. All right, thanks, bye. All right, bye.
But on this particular weekend, the surf report looked pretty messy for spots located directly on the coast. We decided instead to try hitting some spots along the Strait of Juan de Fuca. The land along the strait is scenic, but remote. You can only access it by driving along Highway 112, which runs from Port Angeles to Via Bay. There's no cell service along most of the highway, and there's only a smattering of small towns. So we decided to try surfing along the strait at a spot called Twin. We had surfed there before and had a good lay of the land. The report showed that the waves would be the best in the early morning, so we opted to drive out the evening before and sleep in our car overnight.
I didn't want to drive all the way there
Since it was
today.
late November, we decided to forego paying for a camping spot and would just park somewhere along the beach. We figured that no one would be there, and we were right. When we arrived around 3:30 p.m., the only other people parked there were a young couple in a Westphalia. Nothing terribly eventful happened between our arrival and 6 p.m. We got there, made some dinner, and I took a quick walk along the beach. The only other thing that happened was just before sunset, we heard this loud whistling and saw some guy who had been walking along the highway come down the entrance road, heading toward the beach. My husband and I thought it was pretty odd, given that there's absolutely nowhere you could easily walk to along that highway. All he had with him was a tiny backpack, so he definitely wasn't hiking. He said hello to the young couple as he was walking on the beach, and they invited him to come hang out by their campfire. The last time we saw any of them was around 7 p.m. when we called it a night. I woke up about an hour later and opened the car door a bit to get some fresh air. I noticed that the young couple's vehicle was now gone, and something about them not being there unnerved me. I couldn't put a finger on why, so I just chalked it up to my paranoia from being tired and laid it back down. When I woke up next, it was close to 11 p.m.
They really want me to
and this
get
time
it there.
I shot up so quickly that my husband woke
They're
up
trying
too.
to get me back to Utah.
He asked me what was wrong, and I said,
I've got a creepy feeling.
nothing.
Well, excuse the pun.
I think I just had a bad dream.
I got a creepy feeling that
He seemed
I'm not going to
completely
make
relaxed and fell
my
back
cousin
asleep.
Lisa's wedding.
But I stayed up for about 15 minutes, trying to
Got
listen
sneaky
for
suspicion.
anything. In hindsight, my intuition was screaming at me that something was off. Since I didn't hear anything, I laid back down and really tried to focus on getting some sleep. 20 minutes later, I woke up again, and this time, my husband was already up and listening. Him sitting so still freaked me out, so I turned on the cab light and asked him what was up. Someone was tapping on the windows. I remember feeling this deep sense of dread. When I woke up a few hours ago, I noticed that other couple left. There's no one camping here, except us. At that, we both put on our shoes, grabbed flashlights, a knife, and pepper spray, then opened the car doors. Total silence, pitch black darkness. My husband started up toward the trees behind us to look around, while I stood by our car and shined a light down onto the beach. I saw no one and sat on the back bumper while my husband continued his search.
Yeah.
I checked to see if I had cell service. Nope, not a chance. Maybe 2 minutes went by before he returned,
2 hours
walking
22 on my
fast.
clock. Says it'll take
We
me
need
2
to
hours,
leave. There's a
7
car
minutes to get
parked
there,
by the
bud.
exit road. It's just sitting there with the lights off and the ignition
Traffic
on.
jams and
I
shit
couldn't
might
tell
not
if there
make
was
it.
anyone inside.
But I'm gonna
In no
give it
more
my
than
best.
60 seconds, we threw everything in the front seats into the back where we had been sleeping and began driving back up toward the entrance road. But we didn't want a chance taking that exit and driving by that car. We peeled out of there, going down some back roads. However, in a moment of disorientation, my husband turned the wrong way and went down the highway, heading toward Nia Bay. As we realized we were going the wrong way, I looked behind us, and lo and behold, there was the car, now with its lights on. A few seconds later, it was tailgating us, trying to ram us off the road. I practically screamed, "What the fuck are you doing? There's nowhere to turn around." The highway was narrow, with forest on one side. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Then cutting hard to the left, tires screeching. As soon as we turned, the pursuing car just kept going the same direction. We then took off back down the highway going about 90, heading back towards Port Angeles. Thankfully, Thankfully, no one followed us the rest of the way back. I still feel deeply disturbed when thinking about the intentions of whoever was in that car. Back in 2005, when I was 18, I had just dropped out of high school. I was about halfway through the school year, and I just didn't have the credits I needed to graduate. I also was dealing with some health problems and was altogether frustrated with my life. I was more concerned with drinking than I was with finishing school. So I dropped out and bought a plane ticket and went to go live with my cousin and his girlfriend in Washington State. They lived in a town about an hour north of Seattle. I also had some friends that were a year older than me living in Seattle, and I would occasionally drive down to the city and spend a few days with them, going to concerts and things like that. After a particular stint in Seattle, I decided to head back north to my cousin's place. Me being the financially impaired individual that I was, I left Seattle without a dollar to my name. As I was getting onto the highway, I noticed that I was very low on gas. I figured that I could make it though. But of course, about 20 miles short of my exit, my car begins to sputter. Luckily for me, I was coming up to a rest area, so I pull in to get to the payphone to call the very few contacts that I had. I had no money, so I had to make a collect call to get a hold of my cousin, who happened to be 3 hours away from his hometown, and drunk. No luck there. So I called up his girlfriend, and she doesn't answer. Everyone that I knew in Seattle didn't own a car, so I'm kind of screwed for now. My cousin said that he was coming home in the morning and would pick me up on his way through. So it looks like I'm spending the night at this rest stop. So I get settled with my seat reclined and using my hoodie as a blanket. I'm there for about 20 minutes when a van pulls into the rest area. It was one of those Chevy Astro vans. It parks, and out gets your typical creeper. I would say he was about 5'5", pudgy, balding, and wore a thick pair of glasses like Jeffrey Dahmer. He begins walking around the parking area, glancing into all the parked cars. There were 3 others aside from mine. He then slowly walks right in front of my car and just stares me down for what seems like an hour. At this point, I'm pretty sure my future involves me being referenced in a documentary about serial killers. So the creeper gets back into his van and parks it to where he's behind me, but on the other side of the parking lot. I was parked facing the bathrooms, and behind him was a wooded area. By this time, I'm no longer reclined and relaxed. I'm now sitting up, wide awake, and I'm not taking my eyes off of this shithead. I look into my side mirror, and I see him just sitting in his van, staring at my car. This goes on for about 2 hours. He would occasionally get out of his van and go stand in the darkness of the woods, but I could still tell he was watching me because I saw the cherry on his cigarette light up as he inhaled. At this point, I'm pretty on edge, and I have to take a piss like crazy, but there was no way in hell that I was going to walk into that bathroom with this guy around. I decided to call State Patrol and have them kick this guy out of here. So I called them up and explained the situation, and they say that they will be sending a trooper through shortly. So I hang up the phone, and I'm kind of pacing around while keeping an eye on this creep. The payphone then rings. I'm thinking it was a State Patrol calling back for some reason, so I answer. Hello? Do you want to have a good time? I didn't respond. I just stood there in shock and silence. Let me show you a good time. What the fuck? Hell no. I slammed the receiver down. The damn creeper has the payphone number and was calling me from the forest. I'm slightly terrified at this point, and I'm kind of frozen, but ready to run 1,000,000 miles an hour if I had to. I've got my eye on the woods, and the phone rings again. I can't decide if I want to answer or not. but I didn't want to miss the state patrol if they were calling me back for some reason. So I answer, but I don't say anything. Come on, I don't want to have to hurt you. I can even give you some money. At this point, this piece of shit has just threatened me, so I immediately go into rage mode. I start quickly for my car when I remember there's an axe handle in the back, for situations just like this, I suppose. As I'm walking back toward my car, the creeper emerges from the forest and begins making his way toward me. I get to my car, grab the axe handle, and start towards the sky, pointing it directly at him. You better get back into your van and get the hell out of here, or I'm gonna bash your skull in. He stops in his tracks, stares right at me, just kind of assessing me. He then turns around and gets back into his van, and slowly drives away, all the while not taking his eyes off of me. I am now shaking all over due to the adrenaline. When the trooper finally arrives, I tell him the whole story, and he takes my information and says that he can give me a ride to the Denny's up the road. It would be safer to spend the night there. He then asked if we could first go to the other side of the highway to see if the creep had just switched rest areas. I agree. So as soon as we pull into this other rest area, lo and behold, there was the van. The trooper approaches the van and is talking to the guy for about 5 minutes. I can tell the trooper was giving him the third degree, sticking his finger in his face and raising his voice. The trooper returns and tells me the situation. Apparently, there was nothing he could do to charge the guy. That seemed odd to me, because he had threatened me over the phone and was basically soliciting sex at a rest stop. But I suppose I couldn't prove it was him that called me. The guy didn't have a license. He claimed a friend had dropped him off and was waiting for him to return. The trooper then told him that if he was still there when he passed back through, he would arrest him for trespassing, and if any other troopers saw him, he would be arrested for driving without a license. He also told me that he saw several pairs of binoculars and a large bag of candy sitting in his front seat. How original. So I get dropped off at Denny's, and my cousin eventually picks me up, and I tell him what happened. We have a good laugh about it, and that's the end of the story, right? No. When we get back to that rest area the next day with a can of gas, I noticed that there was a note under one of my wipers. It was from that damn creeper. It was written in a form of poem. I can't remember what it said exactly, but it went something like this. You should have shut your mouth, you stupid little bitch. Somebody should have taught you to never go and snitch. You had better get back on your mama's tit. I can't remember more, but this went on for several pages. The guy had cut all the brake lines and everything else he could underneath the car. We called up the troopers again, and they came and took the note, and I gave my statement. I didn't even own that car. It was a friend of mine who had been visiting from my home state of Minnesota. He wanted to buy a car while he was here and take a road trip back to Minnesota. After what happened, he decided against it and left the car there. I told him that I would make plans to get it later. I didn't stay in Washington much longer after that. I spoke to an investigator one more time. They knew who the guy was, but nothing could be done. I was over it and just wanted to move on. For the short time that I was in Washington State after that night, my cousin and I would pull into every rest stop we passed, hoping to find this guy. In retrospect, it was probably a good thing we never saw him again, because we were dead set on fucking him up. This happened in my hometown when I was 7. The year would have been 1988. For context, I lived on an island off the coast of Washington State in a military town that is among one of the safest places to live in the US. However, weirdos are everywhere. The time of year this took place is vague for me, but since I was outside playing with my friends, I'm guessing it was a summer evening, just before dinner time. We were screwing around, riding our bikes in the street, playing tag. You know, the usual stuff that kids got up to during the 1980s. That's when a car pulled up and stopped in the middle of the street. I don't remember the make or model of the car, or what exactly the driver said to me, but he must have somehow got me over there, because I do remember that I walked close enough to hear what he said. He asked me if I had seen any other kids wandering around, because one of his kids were missing. I then noticed that there was also a woman in the car with him, so I assumed she was the mother, and he was the father. I said no, I hadn't seen any other kids wandering around, but that there was a park nearby around the corner, and he might have been able to find them there. As a side note, I was super proud of myself for thinking of this at 7. The man then asked if I would be willing to get in the car and show them where the park was. Although I didn't fully understand just how dangerous this was, I was still aware of the whole stranger danger thing, so I declined. He kept insisting that I get in the car. Again, I said no, but gave him directions to the park. I then skipped off and continued playing with my friends, who had been standing there watching the whole time. The car slowly pulled away. A few minutes later, my mom came outside to call me in for dinner, and I bounced happily up the driveway to tell her that I had helped someone. I was very excited to have done this for an adult. I then explained the whole thing to my mother. Her face changed a bit, but she nervously said, "That's very nice of you, hon." I then felt a surge of pride. Eventually, my dad came home. He was a solid Navy dude. He was a black belt, used to be in pararescue, the kind of badass Chuck Norris checks under his bed for every night. My mother obviously told him what happened. His reaction was much different. He told me that although he was proud that I liked to help people, but that I was never ever to approach anyone I didn't know like that again. He said, "Remember, adults should never be asking children for help like that." I never forgot his words, and have since passed this wisdom down to my own daughter. He then told me that I was lucky that I hadn't gotten snatched, and to always remember it, because they would have lost me forever if things had gone differently. He was very stern with me, which did hurt my ego a little bit. After 30 years of getting to know my father better, he only gets stern because that is his reaction when he gets scared. Poor guy. Years before this, I had escaped as a toddler and was found on a cliff in Japan. And then I left the yard another time in San Antonio to try and go sell my coloring book pages door to door. I'm sure he was wondering what fresh hell he was in with a kid like me. I'm unaware if my parents ever did anything with that information, but it's almost 100% likely they did tell someone, because they are solid, loving folks. But as far as I'm aware, nothing ever came of it. And I'm not sure if something like this happened in my town again. Growing up, I lived in a decent-sized, middle-class apartment complex. The year this happened was 1988. I would say I was about 5. Since there was only one driveway in and out of the complex, my mother pretty much allowed me to roam around by myself from a very young age. My block of apartments was the first one you passed when you entered the complex, and my apartment was about 100 feet from the main entrance. I wasn't supposed to...
Hey, did you call them and ask them if they have overnight parking? I never got the number. Let me see. So if try and send it again to my main number. Alright, thank you. Alright, bye.
Unless my mom knew where I was going, I was a very curious and precocious child and was very social. My mom used to call me the mayor because I knew who a good number of people in the apartment complex were.
Oh, damn it. What's going on today now? Huh? Going out today? Oh, I see how you are. No one answer.
Tuition. My parents were both pretty tough growing up and educated me early on about street smarts and self-defense, and that sometimes it was okay to speak to strangers and certain He had a Billy Ray Cyrus type spiky mullet. He always wore a tank top and had really bad acne. He also had very strangely arranged teeth and a piggish nose. At the time, I considered him to be in his 40s, but looking back, he was probably in his late teens, early 20s. He loved talking to the other kids about wrestling. That was really big back then. I walked up to his truck once, along with my friends, when he was parked outside of the pool. I didn't have enough money for something, so I said, "Never mind, I don't have enough." But he gave it to me anyway for whatever amount of money I did have. It seemed nice, but I didn't like the way he smiled at me. Unnerving. So if I ever heard the ice cream truck theme playing outside, I would peek out the window to see which ice cream guy was pulling into the complex. If it wasn't him, I would go and get ice cream. If it was, I would stay inside. I don't know how much time passed between my first encounter with him and the last, but in between, there was a few occasions where I was coming home or going to a different section of the apartment complex for whatever reason. And if I happened to be walking down the main drive, he would pull up next to me on the sidewalk, and I would just pretend he wasn't there and cut the cord and hide. He would say things to me like, "Why are you so scared of me? I'm a nice guy. You make me feel bad." One day my mom said I couldn't leave the block for whatever reason. My friend lived in the corner apartment of the block next to mine, so I sat on my court's corner nearest hers, and she sat on her corner. She wasn't allowed to go into my court either, it seemed. So we were just talking and tossing toys to each other when I heard the ice cream truck approaching. Even though I was at the other end of my block, he saw me when he pulled in. He started driving towards me, and I just ran and hid in my court until he moved further into the complex. I waited what felt like a long enough time. I could no longer hear the music anymore. I walked back to the corner, and my friend had already gone inside. I picked up whatever toys I had left behind, and just as I turned to start walking home, I noticed he was sitting in the parking lot of the court across from the main drive, sitting in his truck with the music off. I dropped whatever I was holding and go to pick it back up, and he's already directly across the street from me. "Hey, what's your name? Can we be friends? I feel really bad that I scare you. I'm a really nice guy once you get to know me." He had a tie-dye tank top on. His acne was very flared up and angry, and his hair was really greasy. I remember just being so repulsed by him. My legs locked up, and I was trying to decide if I had a better chance of escaping through the forest that surrounded the complex, or take a chance down the main drive. I can't be friends with you. My mom said so. Well, let me give you a free ice cream. My mom says I can't have ice cream. Okay, you can have a candy or soda, or what about a snap bracelet? Sorry, I can't cross the street. That's okay. You can ride in the truck and play with the music if you want to. I realized this back and forth was going to be a losing battle for me, so I decided the best thing to do was to play along. Okay, if you turn the truck around, I don't have to cross the street so my mom won't get mad. He got way too excited that I seemed willing and began to drive. He would have to leave the complex and immediately re-enter it, but it would buy me about 30 seconds. I then took off running. I got home, and my mom was on the phone with my dad, who was out of town for the day. I told her what happened, and she made me tell my dad. Then they both said how proud they were of me, and how I had made very grown-up decisions. After that, unless I was out of town, I avoided all ice cream trucks that came into our complex. I still think about this to this day, and I always tell this story to the kids I babysit. I just hope I was the only kid he tried to bait, and that nobody else had an experience with him that turned out much worse.
I hate people like that.
Growing up in my neighborhood was sometimes difficult. Since it was below sea level, it flooded every year, which severely limited my ability to go anywhere. Unless the flood was actually in our yard, which was a rare occurrence. Most of the kids from the neighborhood would normally wind up playing ball in our yard. Altogether, there were probably 10 to 8 kids, some of them from our neighborhood, which we called the bottom, and some from the surrounding neighborhoods. We would choose teams and play whatever game was popular at the time. When we moved away in November of 1984, it was a sad time for me, because I was leaving behind the only friends I had ever known, some of whom I've known since kindergarten. I was 15, and we relocated for several reasons. My father got a better job offer in another state. My mom went to school for cake decoration and wanted to start her own business in a bigger town. And our trailer home was starting to show its age. But I think the most important reason my parents decided to move was that the population of the bottom had grown. It attracted a less than perfect quality of resident, if you catch my drift. In the last few years that we lived there, the police were coming out more and more often. The bottom seemed to become a refuge for those who weren't on the best terms with law enforcement. There were more and more vehicles coming down our road, driving faster than what was safe at all hours of the night. It was rare on weekends that we didn't see red and blue lights whizzing past our house while hearing the blare of sirens. One night, a helicopter landed in the field across from our house and was met by an ambulance a few minutes later. We heard later on that someone had broken into a house and had been shot. It wasn't that tight-knit, small community it used to be anymore. The summer...
Hello? Octavian. I said Octavian. Oh. No. Did they say they had overnight parking? what I'm thinking is after I'm offloaded, I'm gonna have to use PC probably to get to a truck stop or something so I can park for the night. Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah. So I'm going to look back. Okay, no, that's the wrong thing. Load information. Where the heck did it disappear to? I've got it on several. They've got it on several different text messages. Oh, damn it! Oh, it's in Wheeling, Missouri. Oh, okay. This is gonna be what? Slaps you. I don't remember. I don't. It's what? Rock? Yeah, I just don't remember it. I got some straps. I don't know if I have 6 of them. I definitely got the 4-inch, plenty of them. I'd have to sit there and count my straps, but I got a few. I just don't know if I have 6 of them. Like I said, I have to look back through all my straps, but I'll see how many I've got. But yeah, I'm pretty close to the delivery. Yeah, and freaking up. Yeah, and I've been up since like 4 in the morning, and I'm still freaking going. Yeah, I got up at 4 in the morning. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I just don't remember. I just remember hauling one of those. Like I said, I don't remember hauling one of those, but still. So if what we have to do is I get to a truck stop before getting there to get some extra 2-inch straps, that's what we'll do. Yeah, plenty of that. Yeah, I got plenty. Remember, send the request for macro point to the other number, not this one, but the other one. It's a big long story, but have them send it to the other phone number. I got my reasons for doing that. Yeah. Yeah, like yeah, I mean, the reason why I do that is because kind of out of a little bit of paranoia. I don't want them having my main phone number, and I don't want them having, because of these tracking apps, what they do is they get information off your phone, so no. Okay. Yep. I've tried calling that number and it went straight to voicemail. Yeah, like I said, I'm still going. I'm not going to stop till I get there, so they won't have to wait till 9, because if I'm the last one they're waiting for, they're not waiting till 9 o'clock. They'll be able to go home after they offload me. Yeah. All right, thanks. Bye. Hey. Were you the one that helped me change the passenger mirror on this truck? Are you the same one? You know, Octavian's brother? Oh, so different person. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while. Alright, bye. Jeez Louise.
For me, on several levels. I turned 15 in July. I'd got my first razor among other gifts, and my voice had finally stopped squeaking. I had grown to 5'10", and I was a cornerback in my high school football team. My dad was teaching me to work on cars by fixing up an old '83 Cougar. I would be driving it around once I got my license. And last but not least, I was in love with a girl who lived down the street from us. Her name was Heather, and she consumed my every thought. We had known each other since her family moved in about a year after us, and we had rode the bus together for almost 9 years. She was my first crush, kiss, love, heartbreak, my first everything. Heather was a year younger than me, and we went from hating each other in elementary school to tolerating each other in junior high. When I began high school, she was still going to junior high, so we'd take different buses. I remember the first day I noticed her as something other than a skinny, dark-haired girl from down the street was when school was Christmas vacation, and she got on the bus wearing a new pair of glasses. Weird, I know, but those glasses seemed to magnify her pretty green eyes in a way that I had never seen before. She caught me staring at her as she walked by to sit with her friends, and smiled at me. Braces. Wow. By the time she started high school the next year, we were a serious item. Her mom and my mom were good friends, and her mother would always say something that would embarrass me. "You two will have the cutest kids." Or, "Oh, I think I hear wedding bells." Of course, she was teasing, but still. Every time we left her house to go for a walk, do homework, or whatever, Dad gave me the sternest look and would say, "Be nice." I knew exactly what he meant, and I was always nice, for the most part. Heather had diabetes, and it always amazed me how she had to get shots every day, every single day. I was in awe at her bravery, and just how she shrugged it off as a part of life. She broke her ankle one summer jumping from a horse who had gotten spooked. So every afternoon, I would ride the bus past my house and carry her books in for her, and then I would walk home. Her mom always invited me to stay for dinner, but I never did. About a week after she broke her ankle, we came home from school one day. There was a new trailer house in the lot next to hers. Her mom told us that she had already met the family, and they had a boy who was around my age, and another son who was around 8 or 9. I met them a few days later when they started riding the school bus. Robert was actually a year younger than Heather. He was a tall, gangly, clumsy type of kid who wore a thick pair of glasses and was really into Dungeons and Dragons. He was quiet and kept to himself. We invited him to play football and do other stuff with us, but he was never interested. He read a lot and stayed indoors. Heather had already told me that he watched her whenever she was outside, but every time she waved, he would act like he didn't see her. Despite that, he was an okay guy. He taught me how to play D&D and another game that I can't quite remember now. His younger brother Jason was a different story. Jason was an odd duck, especially for his age. His head was too big for his body, and his teeth and ears were also disproportionate for his head. He was mouthy too. Anything or anyone that had ever seen or done anything, he or someone he knew had done it better. It got so bad that he would actually make up words about things to see if we would take the bait. He knew all about the Chevrolet Z56 12-cylinder, which was a car with 6 wheels coming out the following year. It would be one of the most desired models of 1985. He knew all about the new bullets the Army had developed that could spot someone around corners and shoot through tanks. Ha! The damn Reds are going to be shaking in their boots now. One day, Heather caught him behind their well house. He was bent over and had his back turned. She asked what he was doing, but he didn't respond, so she walked over to see. He had found a dead bird and was pulling the feathers and skin off of it, like some kind of fucking psychopath. Heather said that she screamed and asked, "What on earth are you doing?" She told me that he never moved and just looked over his shoulder with a creepy smile. "I want the skull." About a month later, Heather's father caught him inside the well house, putting wrenches into his pockets. He grabbed Jason by the arm and took him over to his house to make him admit to his mother that he was stealing. When Jason's mother opened the door and saw that her son was being held by the arm, she went crazy and started yelling at Heather's father, telling him that she was going to sue him. As Heather was telling me all this at our kitchen table, her dad walked by and said that Jason was a creepy little bastard. About a week or so later, Robert showed up at my house and asked if I had seen Jason. He was supposed to be home for dinner, and it was almost dark. I hadn't seen Jason, and I relayed that to Robert. However, my mother overheard Robert asking me and told him that she had seen Jason over in the field across the road. She said that he was playing with a dog in the door of the old abandoned barn. Robert and Jason missed school the next 2 or 3 days. The next time I saw Robert on the bus, he told me that he found Jason in the barn. Jason had killed the dog, and there was blood everywhere, all over him, like he had been playing in it. Robert said he ran home, leaving Jason there, and told his dad about it. They went back to the barn, and Jason was still inside. Robert said his father grabbed Jason and was dragging him out of the barn when he saw a pile of skulls. He told me that there were animal skulls of all different kinds on the shelf. He didn't recognize a lot of them, but he could tell that one was a bird and another was a mouse. He said that there were bigger skulls there too, probably 15 or 20, and they were all in varying states of decay, and some still had skin left on them. Flies were everywhere, and the smell was almost unbearable. Of course, I went straight to that old barn after school, but somebody had taken them all away. There was still a horrible stench in the air, and I saw that somebody had spread sawdust all over the floor. Robert told me that his parents had a huge fight the night they found Jason in the barn. Robert's father was planning on taking Jason to a doctor, but his mother kept insisting that he was just a boy, doing normal boy things. Jason wasn't on the bus for 3 or 4 weeks after that. When he did go back to school, he wasn't the same person. He did not speak to anyone, and he didn't respond when he was spoken to. Obviously, everyone had 1,000,001 questions, but he just ignored them all. He just stared out the window with his mouth open, never saying a word. Looking back now, he must have been on medication, but at the time, I didn't know that. Eventually, the attempts to get his attention turned to ear flicks and swats to the back of his head, but there was never a response. Then, one afternoon, we were riding the bus and approaching our stop when Jason began hitting himself. Nobody noticed at first, until a kid named Bobby turned around in his seat and told Robert that his brother was hitting himself in the face and that he was getting blood all over his clothes. Robert got up and sat next to Jason, holding his wrists together so he would stop. That was the last time I saw Jason before I moved 2 months later. Once we were at our new place, I called Heather as soon as we set up our phone. We had already said our goodbyes but promised to keep in touch. Heather and I would exchange letters and cards mostly. This was before cell phones, and long-distance charges were too much, so I was limited to 1 hour of phone time on the weekends. Heather told me the most important news through the letters whenever she didn't want to be overheard telling me any gossip that was juicy. This is also how I found out that she had gone on a date with someone else. Anyways, Heather told me about how Jason was back in school and how he would get into a fight at least once a week. She said that he was talking now, but only when someone spoke to him, and it was only a one-word response. He always had a scowl on his face and walked around with his hands clenched into fists. She said that someone visited his house on Tuesdays and Thursdays and stayed for about 3 hours before leaving. Sometimes she would hear Jason screaming at whoever it was. It seemed that as time went on, his behavior was becoming more bizarre. He was up all hours of the night, standing by his window and looking outside for hours. Heather also told me that she thought Jason's mother was on drugs. Evidently, she had spoken to Heather and kept calling her Stephanie one time and then Sandra another time. Over the next few years, Heather and I continued to keep in touch. She told me about her prom and even sent pictures. By this time, I had met somebody else, and I wasn't so bothered about Heather seeing other people. Actually, I was jealous, but I never said so. I graduated high school in 1986. She graduated a year later, and then had a wedding announcement the following year, in 1988. That one hit me pretty hard, but by then, I was able to genuinely be happy for her. However, the wedding never happened. I got engaged myself about 6 months after that, and I joined the Army 2 months later. We still sent letters and cards several times a year. Occasionally there would be something about Jason. He stole a bunch of stuff from cars that were parked by our old house after the floods came one summer. Someone saw him going from car to car and called the police. He broke all the windows out of our neighbor's house while they were gone for the weekend. He got caught shooting a pellet gun at someone's horses once, and he was also accused of assaulting a girl, but nothing ever came of it. In December of 1990, my unit was dispatched to Saudi Arabia for Desert Storm. I sent Heather my APO address, and I told her about how my fiance had left me the previous month. She told me to be careful, and that she was afraid for me, and to promise that I would write her as often as I could, which I did. I received a letter from her in May of 1991. We were still overseas and had no clue when we would be heading home. When I opened the letter, there was also a newspaper clipping. It was an article about a 15-year-old boy who had shot his neighbor in an attempted robbery and was being charged with murder. The name of the youth was being withheld because of his age, but it stated the name of the victim, Valerie. At first I thought Heather had sent the clipping because we both knew Valerie. She lived 2 houses down from me. She was a very nice, bubbly woman. She had a huge Great Dane named Toronto. She was one of those people who never seemed to be in a bad mood or had anything negative to say about anyone else. She was one of those people who made the world a better place just by being in it. Then I realized something, and my heart stopped. There was only one person I could think of who would be responsible for this. After reading the clipping, I read the letter. Heather told me that she hoped that I was okay and would be coming home soon. Then she got into what happened. Evidently, Jason got involved with some of the rougher people who lived in the bottom and started using drugs. He had been in some more trouble here and there, and it had gotten worse since his mom left earlier that year. Robert had gotten married and moved to another town. He came back to visit one night, and he and Jason got into a huge fight. Heather was able to hear everything because it was cool out that night, and she had opened up her window for some fresh air. She went on to say that she had heard them fighting and crashing into the walls and breaking things. She told me that one of them had gotten pushed into a window and broke it. At one point, Jason screamed so loud, his voice cracked. After about 15 minutes of this, things got quiet, and Robert left. Heather said that she could hear Jason crying and ranting. She then saw him in front of her house, heading toward Valerie's place. Valerie's husband worked at a grocery store during the day and went to college at night. He was also in the National Guard and was gone a lot during the summers. Whenever he was gone, Valerie's niece would stay with her. Jason was in love with her niece. I can't remember her name now, and I never knew her when I lived there. Heather told me that she didn't give it much thought because she was trying to concentrate on her studies. But when she heard shouting and saw Jason running back to his house, she just assumed that Valerie had told him to get lost, especially if he was on drugs or something. Heather went back to her studies and forgot all about it until she heard shouting again about a half an hour later. She turned off her desk lamp so she could see outside better, and when she looked, the front door of Valerie's house was standing open. She was just about to call the police when she heard a shot and then saw Jason run out of the door heading back to his house. It scared her so bad she couldn't move. She sat in the dark, watching and listening, but was too afraid to draw attention to herself by moving or making any noise. Jason was home for about 15 minutes before he got into his dad's car and left. Once he was out of sight, she ran over to Valerie's house. The neighbor who lived between Heather and Valerie was already there and had already called the police. Valerie's niece was sitting on the sofa with her legs pulled up to her chest, hugging her knees. She was hysterical and crying. Mr. Votal, the neighbor, wouldn't let Heather go into the bedroom and said, "Keep the door closed. You don't want to see what's on the other side." He then told her to sit with the girl, and they waited until the authorities arrived. Heather went on to say that according to the niece's statement, Jason asked him to come inside and hang out. Valerie didn't think that was a good idea. The niece said that his nose and lip were bleeding, and he had cuts and scratches on one of his arms. He was asked to leave, and when he refused, she threatened to call the police. That's when he started shouting and left. The girl said that about 20 minutes later, something hit the side of the house, and Ronto started barking. When Valerie opened up the door, a man in a black ski mask forced her back inside with a pistol in her face. He made her lock the dog in the bathroom and threatened to shoot him if she didn't comply. When he talked, the niece recognized Jason's voice and the cuts on his arm. After the dog was put in the bathroom, he made them both go into the bedroom and lay face down on the bed. He wanted to know if they had any money, and Valerie told him that there was money in her purse. The niece said all was silent for about a minute, and then she heard the gun go off. Jason then ran out of the house. The police would find him a few hours later at a friend's, where he was arrested. He was later tried as an adult and sent to prison. I don't remember the length of his sentence, but as far as I know, he's still incarcerated. I thought he would grow up to be a piece of shit. I had him pegged right from the start. This intrinsic intuition that people sometimes have, where you can tell the difference between bad behavior and a bad personality, even in children. If you're wondering about Heather and I, we eventually got married, but not to each other. Sorry if that disappoints. That's just how the chips fell. She got married to a man she had met in college, and they now live in Texas with 2 daughters. I'm married to a woman from Argentina, and I've been happy ever since. It's funny how sometimes life works out for the best, in spite of some bad times. This happened a very long time ago, and thinking about it now still creeps me out. I lived in Adair County, Kentucky on a horse farm. One summer day about 5 or 6 years ago, my mother, who is the horse enthusiast in our family, found a new horse she wanted to purchase in Lawrenceburg. We'll refer to the seller of this horse as James. Lawrenceburg is one of several places throughout Kentucky where people have claimed to have seen Kentucky's version of Bigfoot, the hillbilly beast, which has been sighted all over the state of Kentucky. My brother and I were suckers for that kind of thing, like most kids are.
Trying to call someone. Yep, no freaking answer. I tried.
In town, James's house was located on the
No luck.
outskirts, miles from anywhere. Only a few houses were dotted here and there on the sides of the road, but there was one in particular I will never forget. We were about 5 minutes away from James's house
72
and
miles
going
away.
slow because we had a trailer hooked to the back of our 4Runner. I was staring out the window, hoping to see the hillbilly beast hiding somewhere in the woods, when I saw a house. This house had well over 20 mannequins throughout their yard, all shapes and sizes. Most were lying down or propped against what looked like a shed, but there were two among them that really freaked me out. One was an adult female, tied to a tree right next to the road, so close I could probably touch it if I rolled down the window and stuck my hand out. The second was the size of a baby. It was nailed to a tree only a couple yards away. Both of them looked really old, worn out, molding, rotting, etc. My mom stopped the vehicle, and we were all just sitting there staring at this place. The house was old and run down, but obviously someone still lived there. The shed that was right next to it appeared almost brand new, minus what looked like satanic graffiti written all over it. The three of us were totally freaked out. We drove away, heading toward James's house. Once we got there, we asked him about the freaky mannequin place down the road. James claimed that he never saw anything like that. He also said that he was just in town that morning and took that exact road, so it's likely he would have seen it. Once we left with the new horse, we took a different way home, so we didn't have to look at the mannequin house again. Part of me thinks this could have been some freaky prank, but another part of me wonders, what if some of them weren't actually mannequins? I didn't even realize how messed up this was at the time, but looking back now, I feel kind of lucky. I haven't really had many encounters like this in my life. I'm a heavy-set male, so creepers tend to leave me alone. When I was 19, I lived in Kentucky, pretty far away from my hometown in Michigan. It was a small town called Pikeville, where there was very little crime. I actually kind of miss it, but I digress. My family came down to visit me for my birthday that year, and we agreed to meet at the Hardys in town the morning after they arrived. I got there kind of early. I'm the type that shows up 15 minutes early, and they're the type to show up 15 minutes late. As I was standing outside waiting, this
Between
man
the two of
walks
us, we
up
can
to
show
me.
up on time.
If you've ever lived in a place like Pikeville, you know that everyone is super friendly, so it didn't strike me as odd when he began talking to me. All kinds of alarm bells should have been going off. Like after he found out I went to college, he said that he saw me at a party. This was impossible, as I never went to a party in this town. When he found out that I liked video games, he started talking about playing Dungeons and Dragons all the time, as he kept taking sips out of some alcohol bottle, and he kept offering me some. Mind you, it's like 10 a.m. at this point. He started talking about how he lost all of his friends because he got into drugs. When he said that, I felt a bit bad for him. He asked me if I wanted to walk around for a bit, and since I knew my family wouldn't be there for a while, I agreed. Now, due to the fact that I had no experience with encounters like this, and the lack of crime in Pikeville, the warning part of my brain was completely disarmed. We walked and talked for maybe about 10 minutes before I realized we were in a shady part of town. We stopped in front of a house that looked long abandoned, with a dark narrow alley. He begins talking about how that live there and how attractive they were. He then told me about how DTF they are, and then asks if I want to meet them. It was at this point that my common sense finally kicked in. I'm in a shady part of town with a sketchy guy I don't know who is just talking about doing hard drugs, and no one knows that I'm here. And now he wants me to go into an obviously abandoned house under the guise of meeting some ladies. I obviously declined this offer and immediately said that I had to get back, as my family was probably waiting for me. He seemed a bit upset about this, and then asks if I could help him move a pool table to his van, which was conveniently parked down the alley. I declined this as well. This is when he started reaching into his jacket pocket. My alarm bell started going off. I realized just how much this guy looked like he might stab me, and I was terrified. But it was at this moment my stepmother did the only kind thing she had ever done for me. She called to see where I was. I took this as an opportunity to make a hasty exit. The creep followed behind me for about 3 blocks. I don't know what exactly this guy wanted. He possibly just wanted to rob me. But still, even though Pikeville is low on crime, that area has a good amount of disappearances and is rumored to be an outpost for human traffickers. I don't know what would have happened if I agreed to help him, but I can't help but think of that one scene from Silence of the Lambs where Buffalo Bill lures a victim into his van and knocks her out. I hope that man got the help he needed and is doing better, but at the same time, I hope just as much that I never have the misfortune of running into him again. Obligatory backstory. I live in a tiny town in northern Kentucky. When I say tiny, I mean microscopic. Nice neighborhood, if not a bit stereotypically southern. Low crime rate, everyone knows everyone. Lots of fundamentalists and pickup trucks. Not my particular cup of tea as an adult, but on the whole, it seemed like a very safe place to grow up in. You had to walk to school because there was no school bus. The town was so small, you could get from one end to the other in about 20 minutes on foot. Big football town, but not much else to do really. The biggest points of interest are the church, the football field, and the Kroger. This happened to me when I was 16 years old. It was a typical Friday night, and I was home hanging out with my kid brother, who was 9 at the time. We recently had new neighbors move in next door. They had a kid named Austin, who was around my brother's age. They became best friends pretty much immediately. There was always a football game going on Friday nights. I wasn't partial to the games. For me, once I saw one, I had pretty much seen them all. I would still occasionally walk down to the field and meet up with some friends of mine to go do something after, but that was about the extent of it. The house phone rings, and my brother gets to it first. I'm quite sure that we were playing a video game of some kind, and around this time, I'm fairly certain it was Super Smash Bros. On the old GameCube, and we had kind of a sibling rivalry going on. He was intimidatingly good for his age. These matches were absolute nail-biters. He hangs up and tells me that Austin is at the game with his parents, and asks if we could go down to get him. Frankly, I didn't want to be down there in a huge crowd of sweaty rednecks, and I told him so. "Oh, come on. His mom says he can't walk home without us. He just wants to come back here and hang out. We can do a 3-person tournament. Come on, please." For crying out loud. Fine. Let's go. It was a 10-minute walk there maximum, and on the bright side, at least we didn't have to stay. We'll go down, grab Austin, and then we're heading straight back here to play some video games.
Oh shit. That startled me. Sperm bank, you jack 'em, we pack 'em. Just almost to my destination, 61 miles away. And eventually I'll be there with a few minutes left on my clock. Yeah, they want this load off now, and then they want me to, I guess, deadhead a little bit, then go park the truck. Because apparently there's no overnight parking. Apparently they got a load that's going from, I forget where, but it's eventually going to Colorado. Yeah, but I've got a sneaky suspicion I'm going to miss the wedding. Because it's on the 2nd. Well, not according to my GPS, or not my GPS, my calendar. That's in a few days. Sorry, everyone. Left on hold. Smokehouse barbecue. Stinks. Looks like a garage to me. Left me on hold, how dare you? Oops.
Dead street, hang a left, and start down the main road. The sports complex was on this road, at the very bottom of the hill.
Wants to leave me on hold?
It was about twilight, and from the top of the hill, we could already hear the marching band and the cheering. I didn't see many folks around, but nothing looked out of the ordinary. I really didn't expect to see anyone. Pretty much the entire town was at the game. Looking ahead, I could see parked cars lining the street, with the bulk of them right by the turnoff into the stadium. My brother was doing the typical kid brother thing as we walked. Hey, do you know that owls can turn their heads almost completely around? Me and Austin had a shoe throwing contest, and my shoe went so far, I almost couldn't see it anymore. Hey, look at this flower. It's awesome. At about the halfway mark, I could see a gold SUV pull up across the street, just opposite of where we were walking. It sits for about 10, maybe 15 seconds, and then a man gets out. just as we were passing by. So he's now behind us. It was an older man, mid-40s, weasel face, tall and wiry, weird-looking smile. At the time, however, I didn't think twice. Of course, it was just a guy going to the game, probably meeting up with some friends or family. So we kept walking like normal. After about 30 seconds or so, I hear shuffling. I turn around out of reflex, just to glance behind me to see what's going on. The man was gaining on us. Alright, no big deal. He's probably trying not to miss anything. He'll breeze right past us here in a few seconds. I would have loved to keep a brisker pace myself, but I had my kid brother in tow, and his 9-year-old legs just couldn't keep up. So we kept going as usual, and now I have made a mental note. A bit more time goes by, maybe another minute, and I start thinking, I wonder why he hasn't passed us yet. When I looked back the first time, he sure seemed like he was in a hurry. So I turn around again. This man is now right behind us, close enough for me to see the creepiest smile I've ever seen in my life. But I should correct myself. He wasn't behind us, per se. He was directly behind my brother. And when I glanced back, he had his arms out in front of him, reaching for him, and almost had a hold of his upper right arm. I had caught this creeper mid-snatch. I reached out my left hand and put it around my brother's back. Probably 5 seconds went by, but it felt like a lot longer. After I had an arm barrier, I do a quick scan of the street. There is no one else around, no witnesses, no help. And this guy is a lot bigger than me. What the fuck am I gonna do? I then lean down and say, as quietly and as calmly as I could, "Hey, I bet I can make it there faster than you can." I start speed walking, and so does my brother. I have my arm on his back, and am half pushing him to our destination, rushing him along as fast as he could walk. I see the sports complex, and it's just down the hill. We are now about a minute or so away at most. After about another 30 seconds, the whole scenario seemed to go by in slow-mo. I turn around again. The man is matching our pace to keep right behind us, and he's closing in. Now I really start to panic. He was really after us. There was no other explanation, and I caught him almost grabbing my brother. And now, he was almost within grabbing distance again. He's picking up speed, and he's fucking smiling. It was a predatory look. I turn back around, and I see that we are close to the stadium. So close. If we could just get down a bit further, the property opens up, and there will be people everywhere. We have to get down there, right now. I try to sound as calm as I could, but I'm sure I didn't at this point. Faster, come on, I'll race ya. We both take off running. I was paying more attention to him than what was ahead of me. I'm trying to keep him in my sight the entire time. He thinks this is a game. I remember feeling a tiny speck of relief. He doesn't know someone is trying to kidnap him. He was pretty fast for a little guy. He was in it to win it. I could see the entrance to the stadium, and I think we're home free by now. When I looked behind me again, the man is now running full speed. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. He was not quite close enough yet. I whipped back around and sped up to my personal max speed. And of course, my brother pumps his own legs to the max as well, because he wants to win the race, so he can brag about it later. Once again, I'm looking directly at him. I hear thuds on the pavement behind us, and I know this man was getting dangerously close to us. My heart was sending electrical currents of fear to the rest of my body, and just as I heard him coming up, we hit the stadium grounds. It was a sharp left, and boom, There were people everywhere. At this point in the game, it was halftime, and the adults were all out by the entrance area, smoking and talking. The view of the entranceway and all the people was obscured by a stone archway on the street, which marked the stadium grounds. I had never been so happy to see a bunch of sweaty country folk in all my life. The man was right behind us, and the second he turned the corner and saw all the people, he panicked. I could see the surprise and fear in his eyes. I had turned around in that moment to see where he was, and I looked directly at him, and we locked eyes in that moment. I had outsmarted him. He glanced around at everyone, looked at me, then to my brother, then turned around and walked back the way he came from. The kid was out of breath, but still nudged me to go collect his friend. "Just give me a second, man." I peeked around the stone archway and watched this man walk all the way back up the hill, across the street, and climb back into his SUV. He then drove away. I think that's when it fully hit me, the seriousness of the situation we were just in, and the very real danger. That monster was there to get us, and what's more, he probably would have if we had not made it to the stadium when we did. The crowd spooked him, and that's what likely saved my brother's life. We found Austin, but we waited until the game was over and caught a ride home with his folks. It wasn't a burden on them. We lived right next door. I was shaken up for the rest of that night, and for a couple of days after. This small Kentucky town is the last place in the world where you would ever think somebody would try to abduct a child. Also, I never told anyone about this incident. At the time, I was just so scared that I didn't want to talk about it. But looking back, I'm not entirely sure if that was the right choice to make. I have never told my parents. I have never told my brother, who's almost 20 years old now and could probably handle it. I just have never seen a reason to give him anxiety about something that happened years ago. And I have no idea who that man was. I don't know if he lived around there or far away. I don't know if he did this again, or if he's been caught, went to jail, or perhaps is still out there somewhere. I do know for certain that he was there that night to kidnap my brother, and I don't want to reflect on what kind of fucked up plans he had for him. It horrifies me to think about how this would have destroyed my family if my brother had been abducted and never seen again. Picturing him crying out our names in the dark while that monster smiles down at him. It's not something I care to dwell on. But I can tell you this much, however. That was the only time in my life in which I meaningfully uttered the phrase, "Thank God for sweaty rednecks." I'm a police officer from Idaho. One story that stands out to me the most would have to be Halloween night 2001. This particular experience nearly made me leave the force due to the strangeness of this whole ordeal. It starts off on a regular patrol. My actual partner was sick, but somehow still managed to attend a Halloween party I would later find out. So I was stuck with a crotchety racist who I really didn't like. About an hour in, he spots something past a thicket on the side of the road. "Hey, look, what are those guys up to?" We stopped to see what looked like a bit of an impromptu costume orgy. This kind of thing was normal for Halloween around here, sadly. It was more often than not drunk partygoers being controlled by their hormones. There were two men dressed as Mickey Mouse, and there was someone else who was hard to see, but they appeared to be dressed as a deer. Normally, when I see something like this, I let them have the privacy and finish up before chasing them off or arresting them, depending on the location. This time was disconcerting, though. They weren't holding this person down, but from what I could see, they were unresponsive. So we strolled up and tapped on a tree to get their attention. They didn't stop canoodling. but what we saw made us jump back, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I vomited on the spot. This is the part where I say that what I saw was the single most awful thing I have ever seen in my life. It wasn't somebody in a deer costume. It was a half-butchered doe with its insides strewn about, and they were taking turns with it. And the only thing that they were wearing was the Mickey Mouse masks. The mental image is really fresh in my mind, even after all these years. This was just so inhumanly awful that I can't adequately describe it. We were completely frozen for about a minute until my temp partner, I refuse to refer to him as my partner, took out his gun and began yelling at them. The two men didn't pay any attention to us and just kept at it, covered from the waist down in blood, what appeared to be some solid matter. My brain finally kicks in, and I tell the temp to lower his gun, and we step forward and detain the two men. We radio HQ and take the two men back to the station. They don't say a damn word the entire way back, but one of them kept chuckling. They tested positive for meth, no surprise there, and were both very incoherent, even after they came down. I didn't look into it much, but they both were apparently run-of-the-mill laborers who had gone missing a month prior. So that is one of the more gruesome things I've ever seen on patrol, certainly the most visually disturbing anyway. So yeah, happy Halloween. There's always a reason to be afraid.
In mid-2005, I fulfilled one of my biggest dreams, to have my own farm. I had grown up on a farm in Oklahoma with my grandparents until they passed away, and I was left in the care of an aunt who lived in Texas. I was 14 years old at the time. Unfortunately, after my grandparents passed away, their children decided to sell the property because no one was really willing to take care of it, and I was just a kid. That was a devastating blow because really, that place had great sentimental value to me. After all, that had been my home since my parents passed away when I was just 3 years old. So basically, that was the home I had known for my entire conscious life. However, when I was 28 years old, I made a good amount of money after investing my savings in a real estate business with my best friend. It wasn't a lot of money, not that it made me a millionaire, but it was enough money to allow me to buy a decent-sized farm. The truth is that my initial intention was to get my grandparents' farm back. That is, to buy it from its current owners. But even though I made them a very good offer, they refused to sell it. I told them my family history and the meaning that this place had for me, with the intention of softening their hearts and making them understand that I had an important reason for wanting to buy precisely that property. But this only served for them to ask me an absolutely ridiculous amount for it. In short, I achieved the opposite effect. After this disappointment, I simply gave up, but not on buying a farm, but on trying to buy my grandparents' old farm, so I opted for one that was for sale in South Texas. The property was 30 acres, and from the very moment I set foot there, I knew I wanted it. The main house was a 2-story log construction, but it was spacious and fairly modern in design for being in the country. Likewise, it enjoyed all the amenities you could have in the city, but on a large tract of land. There was also a huge barn, a large and well-equipped paddock for livestock, pens for pigs, and an extensive corn plantation. But one of the places that attracted me the most was a large carpentry workshop that was also equipped with all kinds of tools and materials for work. This immediately caught my attention as my grandfather also had a rather large workshop on our old farm and was an excellent carpenter. I had learned a great deal from him and also liked carpentry very much, so I knew I would be spending quite a bit of time at this place. The owner of the farm was a boy about my age, or the age I was at the time. He told me that this place belonged to his father, who had lived there alone since he separated from his mother in the mid-1980s. But he had recently passed away. He told me that his father never remarried and had no more children, so he was his only heir. But he had decided to sell the farm because he never really liked the countryside, and that's why he hardly ever came here. Plus, his father also preferred to visit him in the city or take him camping and other places, because this farm was like his sanctuary, and he didn't like to receive visitors, not even his own. The boy joked that his dad was a hermit of sorts, and that's why he spent most of his life confined to this farm of his own free will. He also told me that all in the place he designed and built himself, obviously with a little bit of labor, but most of it was done by him, as he was a great carpenter and had a lot of talent for design and construction. While chatting with him, I asked him what his father had passed away from, if he could say so, of course. Then he told me that he was HIV positive and died from related complications. However, that was something they found out about after his passing. I wasn't even sure if he knew that himself. I told him I was very sorry and told him a little about my history with my grandparents. After that, he handed me all the keys, put himself on call if I needed anything else, and we said our goodbyes. A few days later, I settled into the property. I was really excited and pleased with the deal I had made. The place was beautiful and was everything I had wished for. However, I noticed that in some places some repairs needed to be made, and I also thought I would do a couple of remodeling. Some boards were no longer in their best condition, and in other places there were leaks, so I spent a few days in the carpentry shop working on it. One afternoon, while I was working on a large plank of wood that I had thought of to make a coffee table for the kitchen, I started looking through the shelves for some 180 grit sandpaper that I needed for polishing, but it was nowhere to be found. So I glanced over to one of the shelves in the back corner and thought I saw some other materials there. So I walked over there to see if I could find it. But as I was standing on my tiptoes in the corner looking through the shelf, I noticed that the sheet of wood on the floor under my feet felt strange, hollow. I stood for a moment outside it, and with the heel of my boot, I tapped it several times. And indeed, it sounded different from the rest of the floor. It sounded as if it was laid over an empty space. This made me curious, because I didn't know if it was a depression in the floor under the workshop, or if this was put there on purpose. I was almost sure it was the latter, because all the boards around it sounded exactly the same, compact on all edges. This was the only one that sounded hollow, as if it was the lid of something. Now I was curious, so I reached for a bar and started to peel the board off the floor. And when I finally managed to pull it out, I was very surprised. Indeed, this was no coincidence. Under the board there was a kind of secret trunk, where some things had been kept, or rather hidden. Among them there was an old book, a pair of glasses, and a knife. But what caught my attention the most was a wooden box, a little smaller than a shoebox, that was in the corner. It was old, and had some dark stains that looked like fingers. It looked like someone had handled it with dirty hands of something, and their fingers were marked all over the box. I immediately picked it up and carried it with me to the work table. I was very curious to find out what was inside it. I assumed old family heirlooms from the previous owner, or perhaps some things of value. But what I found there was something very different, something I was totally unprepared for. Just as I assumed, inside I discovered some old objects that were not exactly valuable, but surely had some meaning for whoever put them there. Among the things there was also a pile of photographs tied with a red ribbon, but they were behind a small sheet of paper that had the word dolls written on it in marker. The items included some rings, an old lighter, and even a silver pin with a flower on it. But when I pulled out the tape and discovered the pictures, my stomach knotted up and I almost threw up. All the pictures were of young women naked or semi-naked and bound with ropes and handcuffs. The photos were old. They looked like they were from the 80s or 90s, and some were in very bad shape, probably from the time they were in the wooden box. But what was really disturbing was that none of these women were smiling or posing. They all looked terrified, and most were crying. It seemed clear that these women were not doing this of their own free will. As I flipped through the photographs, I came across some that really turned my stomach. Several of them were of girls no more than 16 or 17 years old, and in most of them you could see significant signs of physical violence. Bruises on their faces and other parts of their bodies, bloodstains on their mouths, and things of that sort. It was very disturbing. At this point, I was completely shocked, but I soon realized another even more disturbing detail. I started turning the photographs over, and then discovered that each one had a name and year written on the back. Leah, 1986, Alice, 1993, Stephanie, 1997. In all, I counted 39 photographs, and the most recent one was from 1999. This one was of a blonde girl named Rose. At that point, I had a terrible thought in my head. These were the kind of things I used to see in serial killer documentaries. But then I remembered one in particular, one I had seen a few years ago, where they talked about a series of disappearances of women that had occurred in this state that had never been solved. I remembered that most of the victims were women engaged in prostitution, and the presenter was talking about the fact that when the victims are women at night, it seems that the authorities don't take it too seriously to look for them. I sat in my work chair with my back completely straight, and my eyes fixed on the wall for a moment, as my mind whirled trying to process what I had just found out. Is it possible that this boy's father was actually a serial killer and they never knew it? After all, this would explain the fact that he didn't like anyone coming to the ranch, not even his own son, even if to a lesser extent. This would also explain the fact that he had contracted HIV. As I was thinking about that, I remembered that there were other things inside the secret trunk, so I walked over there and picked up the old book that was in the corner of the trunk.
That's fucked up.
This one had no signs on the cover. It was just a book with a leather cover, as if its original cover had been torn and someone had replaced it with some kind of old leather lining, probably from another book, since this cover was quite a bit bigger than the pages it contained and had no inscription. So I didn't know what it was about until I opened it and started reading. As I began to glance through the book, my blood slowly began to freeze, and a cold began to drip from my forehead. It was a 120-page book where the author, who was nowhere to be found, explained in great detail what were the 10 most effective ways to make a corpse disappear. I can tell you that I only managed to skim the first few pages because my nerves would not allow me to read anymore. Just to give you a little idea, in those first pages it talked about how to dismember the corpse, separate the meat from the bones, and
Hello? Okay. Yeah, figures. I think they're always right or whatever. They think the world revolves around them because they got a BMW. Why is that? So in other words, you don't want to work on those vehicles. Yeah. Yeah, in other words, it sounds like that vehicle's worse than my Focus. Yes, you'd much rather deal with that Focus than that BMW. Even though they're a real pain in the ass. Imagine if you added a turbo to that. Oh. much more extra horsepower that Civic I had would, how much extra horsepower it would have if we added a turbo to it. Of course, I don't remember its stock horsepower. I'm pretty sure you can look it up. You get to go do work on other cars or relax at home. 34 miles so I get to the cold storage. I can't wait to get done with this damn load. I'm assuming they'll let me park on their property for the night. Look, I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, I'm running low on energy. Especially since being up since 4 and soon after driving. After I get done driving today, I would have basically knocked out probably what, a little over 600 miles. Let me guess, the way it was before, all your tools were just clutter fucked into some container. Damn. Maybe you should upgrade to one of those one tool things where you take the bed of your truck off and put one of these tool container things, whatever the fuck they're called, on your truck. Why not? No, do you? Oh, but I also know you wanted another pickup truck with a service bed already on it. Flashy blinky lights, huh? Giving you a hard time, you know that. 28 miles before I get there, and I've got 59 minutes left. Talk about pushing the clock. Right? There's a what? Yeah. Like it. Fun. More blinky lights. Instead of plug and unplug, plug and unplug. Yeah. Last time I was there, remember? We were talking about it late at night. We're at the Sat Brothers, and basically I had to keep going back to the bathroom because my gut was acting up. Yeah. You know what I was thinking? Tease that cop some more about the fact that he had to trespass me. Just tease him. Don't piss him off. Just tease him. Just for fun. Just do that. Just say, hey, this guy. I was teasing you, but that came from my friend that you had to trespass. Just for shits and giggles, right? I mean, I know he was just doing his damn job. I know he was. Why is that? I don't know. Next time you see him, tease him a little bit. And then if you ask why you're teasing him, you just say, that basically my friend wanted me to tease you, the guy that you got to trespass at that truck stop. When I always go to the fuel. Just tease him. Brother. Really? So you obviously can't drive two vehicles, so yeah, you have to tow one of them. Right. So how does it feel to finally tow your truck instead of my van? It's just weird though, isn't it? Instead of like, you remember when you towed my van, now you're towing the truck that towed my van. Like how much a month? a month, that's it. Now it's a little more than I was paying for that van. But then again, you can easily make up for it with that tow truck. What about insurance and all that? Right. Yeah. So with the, is he paying for the insurance or are you? Ah. What do you mean your cut of it? Oh. He pays the rest, obviously. Do I even want to know how much? Someone's calling me. I don't even know who it is. I'm not answering. Somebody's calling me on the other phone. I'm not answering. Don't know who it is, therefore I'm not going to answer. And if you still have the record when I finally come back to Utah to stay in Utah, yeah, I'm driving that record or basically doing tires or whatever. That's what I want to do. Because I've been wanting to... Big deal. If I can get a CDL, I can get a license to tow vehicles. Not that hard, not that difficult. So basically all I have to have is a, towing license on my, endorsement on my license, big deal. Oh, so not like a Utah driver's license, it's just a license to tow. Okay, now I got it. I mean, just got to study for it, pass. Changles. The hell is a twin changle? Oh. Okay. 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 Oh, which angle? Not which end. I thought you said something else. I'm like, the fuck? I think, yeah, you mean which angle? I thought you said something else. I'm like, what the fuck is that? That hard to memorize. I mean, hell, I bet you there's an app where I can just get out there and start studying. Nope. Damn, so no app I can download like for like the study test for the CDL and shit. Damn it. So stick my nose in the book and memorize. Of course, it also helped with watching YouTube videos of how to do stuff like this. Yeah. How much? Fuck it. Right after you sign it, basically you're already starting to make money. Like I said, once I get my towing license, that's what I want to do, and obviously do tires and stuff. What kind of... Oh, God. You're paying for it until paid in full. Well, like I said, with me back in Utah, you know damn well I'll be all over that tow truck. You tell me, okay, this location, that location, this location, do this, do that. I'll be like, okay, no problem. And I'm guessing, besides this one tow, you've towed other vehicles. Okay. You repos. I already knew what it pays. You get paid a certain percentage of each repo. Yes, it's dangerous as hell. Yeah, somebody. So what is this set fee? That you get or that he gets? And then if I end up doing the tows, how much did you end up paying me to do it? And then how many would I have to do to be able to, live nice? You know, I mean, as far as having all my bills paid and shit. And that'd make it to where I could easily basically have all my bills paid and shit. So how much is this 20-something%? Nice. Yeah. Here's my turn. So you guys, you're running the math. So you get the majority of it. I get the 50-something. I'm not complaining. Like I said, as long as I can get my bills paid, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, like I said, as long as I can pay my bills, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, 13 miles from my destination. I actually didn't think I'd be making it. I thought I'd be basically calling it quits and getting there in the morning, but nope. Freaking Octavian and them said they want this load there today, and then for me to start heading somewhere to go pick up the next one so I can get to Colorado and try and get to Utah within a certain amount of time. Well, I also... Yeah, but they didn't. I know this and you know this. Next time I'll say I want to be home 4 or 5 days early. So this way I could be home in more than enough time. Or I should have lied on her wedding date and said it's this date, not this date. Therefore, there's more incentive to get me home by that time. So I can already see basically what they're doing. You know? I'm literally figuring them out. Miles. I'm going through some little country back road and shit. Okay. Just need to turn. Oh wow. There's a gravesite out here. Alright, talk to you later. Alright, bye.
Then roast the bones in the oven.
There you go, guys.
Pulverize them with a hammer and
There's your,
spread them in the yard or use them as fertilizer for plants. I swear I had never in my life felt so terrified and disgusted at the same time. Especially when I looked back into the trunk and noticed the huge butcher knife lying there next to the glasses. I was now almost certain that this man was a sexual aberrant and a serial killer. But how could someone murder 39 women over 2 decades and get away with it? At that moment, I was tremendously confused and upset. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I had seen enough TV shows of criminal cases to know that this qualified as clear evidence that this guy really was a serial killer. But on the other hand, he was already deceased and his son didn't really seem to be aware of it, since he told me about his father in a very good way. But you never know. Obviously, that evening, my carpentry work took a backseat, and I couldn't sleep a wink all night either. I couldn't sleep just thinking about the awful things that had happened in that place. It took me a couple of days to decide what to do, but finally I decided to do the right thing. I called the police and gave them all the evidence I had found. But first I contacted Caesar, the son of the man who sold me the farm. I told him everything about what I had found and that I was going to give it to the police. His reaction was no less than expected. He was as surprised as I was when I found all this. But I also noticed him very shocked and maybe disappointed. After all, how could someone feel who just found out that his father, whom he always considered a righteous man, was actually a sexual aberrant and a ruthless killer? A few days after I turned the evidence over to the police, they informed me that indeed many of the photographs belonged to women who had disappeared without a trace. Others had never been reported, so they were never heard from. Most of them were night workers, which reminded me again of that TV program I had seen, and I realized that this man was the person behind all these disappearances. After that, the police searched the entire property for the bodies of the victims, but never found anything. However, according to the analysis of the photographs, these were taken in the basement of the house, where they later found another compartment on the floor similar to the one in the carpentry shop. But this one had a lot of creepy stuff like chains, leather strips, handcuffs, whips, and more creepy gadgets that they presumed were used on the victims. As you can imagine, after this I wouldn't stay in that property. It was very nice and all, but there was no way I could live there knowing the creepy things that happened in that place. So I talked to Caesar again, and he had no problem in agreeing to give me my money back and cancel the deal. I really felt sorry for him, because I figured it would not be easy to be in his position. But I also thought of all those families, of all those innocent girls who had to go through the pain of not knowing what happened to their loved one, and who now, after decades of uncertainty, would finally have closure. This finding in that farm was the most terrifying experience of my whole life, and after that I spent years having nightmares in which horrifying images of what those poor girls lived through were reproduced. I don't know if they were just inventions of my traumatized mind or if they were real. What I do know is that it took me a while to digest what happened in that place. never forget the summer of 1995. At that time, I was 9 years old, and I lived in my grandparents' old farmhouse with them and my father since my mother died while giving birth to me. That summer was especially sweltering, but I managed to have fun anyway. I was always a bit sickly, and so my grandmother Emma took great care of me. So during the days when it was too sunny or just the weather was not the most favorable, she let me play outside, so I had to find a way to entertain myself inside the house. Always. But that year Aunt Lily decided to take them to the beach. I had to stay behind because I had the mumps that week, so I was stuck in the monotony of the countryside with my grandparents and dad. The farm was big, but for a single child, every nook and cranny seemed already fully explored and every game repeated ad nauseum. But there was one place that always offered something to entertain, and that was the attic, which was full of old junk and cobwebs. I never understood why my grandparents never finished getting rid of all the junk that was there, because clearly there were a lot of things that were useless and that nobody would repair, like an old rocking chair with a broken leg, a sewing machine from the years of yesteryear that was no longer useful for anything, and a lot of old clothes that nobody used, among other artifacts and objects of all kinds stuffed in.
Only 8.8 miles from the destination. Let's see if they answer. Knock it off.
Thanks to all the stuff in the place, it had become my favorite place to play. It was like a world of treasures and mysteries to her. That afternoon, I spent it putting together an improvised truck with pieces that I took from some of the junk that was around. Among them, the wheel that made the old sewing machine work, which was metallic and reminded me of a wagon wheel, but much smaller. So easy since I needed many materials with more or less specific shapes to do it. So I took the task of sifting through everything, moving things from here to there, opening old boxes and trunks in search of any material that could serve me. I remember that I even stole the strings of an old guitar to make the ties and assemble the pieces, but I still lacked the front wheels. Well, I managed to match the wheel of the sewing machine with the lid of a pot that I got lying around, and that was more or less the same size. These served me perfectly as rear wheels, so I just had to get the front ones. I started to move things and open boxes and trunks, taking out a lot of junk and leaving them scattered all over the attic. And that's how I got a super strange device that was like a kind of cart that had on top a handle, a pair of handles in front as a radio, and 4 wheels. But this was missing one and another was half broken, however. 2 wheels was just what I needed, and these were the perfect size. It was all I needed to finish putting together my super truck. The only problem was that these wheels were made of solid iron, as was the bottom of this sort of unknown device that to this day I still don't know what it is. The thing is that the wheels were attached to the base with some kind of screw, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get them off with my own hands, so I started looking inside the attic for something that would serve as a tool to get them off. I didn't want to bother my grandfather so as not to run the risk of him getting angry, or telling me that I couldn't do that. I knew that nothing in there was used at all, but for some reason he liked to accumulate things in there.